why is my memory not as good as other people? Because I noticed this when I was with my friend in Thailand many years ago. I think I was 21 years old. And we could leave the house and go on our little mopeds for about an hour.
Yeah.
And he could navigate us back home without needing sat-nav or Google Maps. And if I go 3 minutes down the street, I'm lost. And I always wondered why that was. Is it? And then even with names and stuff, I would always, he's my best friend, he still is one of my best friends for 7-8 years. We ran a business together and he would remember every name of every person and I couldn't, I wouldn't. And so I'd always turn to him and say, what was that person's name again? What's that, And I always wondered why my memory, he seemed to have this incredible memory and mine seems to be pretty rudimentary.
I would argue that, everybody has parts of their memory that aren't as good as they want, but also other forms of memory that they're very good at. So I would guess, I've only just met you today, that your memory for stories and storytelling and story progress is excellent because it has to be for the job that you do. I bet you it's much better than your friend that can navigate back. Not everybody has a perfect memory in all the different dimensions. And it's like our personality. Some people have a wonderful sense of humor and others don't. It is about how our brains are wired, which is defined both by nature and nurture, our genes. And, if I went to stand-up comedy class, I would probably get funnier. But there's probably a limit to my funniness compared to other people.
So there's different types of memory.
Yes.
In your book, you talk about there being, I think, is it 3 different types of memory in total that are formed in the hippocampus?
There's lots of different names for forms of memory in the hippocampus, but I like to describe it as the hippocampus is critical for our memory for facts and events, also called declarative memory or cognitive memory. Another form of memory that's dependent on a completely different structure is motor memory, the memory that you use to learn how to play tennis or pickleball or whatever you're playing. And it's not declarative. I can't declare how I do a backhand in tennis, but it is in your motor functions. And this is dependent on the striatum, and a motor-related structure. And then there's the prefrontal cortex, dependent on that working memory or scratch pad memory, keeping things in mind. So you and I are both trying to remember what we've just said so we can link it to things that we might say in the future.
One of the things that I found really interesting, both as a marketeer, but also as a podcaster and as someone that's making a lot of content and trying to get people's attention, was as I was reading through your work, it became quite clear to me that there's a bit of an overlap between memory and attention in many respects. Because
absolutely.
You were talking about these 4 things that make facts or events memorable.
Yes.
And many of those things are things that I think about as a marketeer when I'm trying to get someone to engage with something, click on something, buy something.
Yeah.
What are those 4 things?
Okay.
Can we go through them?
Absolutely. So I like to say there are 4 things that make memory stick. And this is after 25 or 30 years studying the hippocampus and how memories work. Number 1 is obvious, repetition.
Okay.
You remember things with repetition. Number 2, not as obvious, association. The hippocampus is an associative structure. It associates one thing with the other. For example, your name and your face. So I just met you, and I will remember your name and your face now. But it also helps you remember things like who's married to each other, associating the husband with the wife. Have you heard of the memory palace?
Yes.
Yes. So this is a technique that has been used for many, many ages to help remember things. And it is a strategy where you picture a spatial location that's very familiar to you, like your childhood home. And when you need to remember a list of items, you take an imaginative walk through that very familiar environment and place those items in particular locations in the environment. That is associating something really familiar, your childhood home, you know every corner of it, with the new thing you need to remember. And that works and has worked for memory champions for many years because the hippocampus associates things together. That's number 2, association. Number 3 is novelty. We remember novel things. I've never been to this particular studio ever before in my 26 years in New York and Brooklyn. So this is a novel thing, and I will remember coming here to do this podcast with you. Our brains, and this is where it interacts with the attention system. Our attention system focuses on things that are novel. Why? Because it could be dangerous. If I've seen things over and over and over again, I don't notice them. They go into the background. It's not going to hurt me any, it's not going to cause me any danger.
Cliche. That's why cliche doesn't work in marketing.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, but something novel, that really perks people up. I use that in my teaching all the time. Surprise students with an element of what you want them to learn, and they will remember it better. But the fourth one, which is so powerful, and we know it intuitively, we understand this intuitively, is emotional resonance makes things more memorable. We remember the happiest and the saddest things in our lives because that emotional resonance solidifies those memories. Where does that come from? It comes from a structure called the amygdala that sits right in front of the hippocampus, right in the front of the temporal lobe right here, and the hippocampus is right behind it. Amygdala means almond. It's an almond-shaped structure, and it sits right in front of the kind of tube-shaped structure that is the hippocampus behind it. And the amygdala is kind of infusing the hippocampus and kind of giving it a little jolt when it's emotionally resonant, either really happy or really sad.